Hi, this is Chris Caracci, former Navy SEAL, former tactical police officer, and security specialist. I'm very proud and privileged to be on the 25th Hour radio show for a rare community service show. God bless you, Randy and Robert, for the effort you're making. And folks, take a listen to 25th Hour. I hope it makes a difference in your life, because I know it does in mine.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.
Chris, in thinking about what happened yesterday, the tragic events, we got to thinking about you and wanted to give you a call and kind of find out, your thoughts on it. We know you're a tactical expert, have the ability and innovation to handle situations of this magnitude, and you've been in situations like this.
Guys, Robert, Randy, always a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm happy that you felt comfortable enough to give me a call on something like this. So, I look forward to our conversations. Unfortunately, something like this, it's a very tragic time. It's basically horrible. Anything like this ever, and something happening in Christmas. I mean, certainly, I know you guys and me, our hearts go out to these people. It certainly is beyond words and beyond our comprehension. And out of respect for these people, I won't say more, because only they really know this pain, and others that have gone through it. So beyond that, though, it's amazing that on that day, my flag was already flying at half-mast for a young Navy SEAL that recently on the special team gave his life to save an American. And then on that same day, we hear about a tragedy in China where a knife-wielding nut attempted to kill 20-some children and adults. And, I don't ever want to get on a political issue, especially with you guys and on your show. You get taken out of context and misquoted so much. This isn't going to be a political forum. It's basically this. Guys, we could outlaw guns tomorrow completely. Yet it would still be decades, if ever, before there would be any change, because there are so many weapons out there. And on the other hand, I do have a strong feeling about people want to control their own environment. So in reference to your question on this kind of topic, I will say this. I'm not going to talk about how someone could defend themselves. Could I? You bet your ass. Would I? You? Same. What I'm going to talk about right now is a normal person. How can they approach something like this and come out alive? How could they approach something like this and survive? And I would like to go down that path if you guys think that would be appropriate for your
that'd be
listeners.
Great. It'd be helpful, in trying times like we're living in right now. I've often thought to myself, and I know Robert is too, he's got a precious little sweet angel that he's raising, and I've got two beautiful little daughters. And, as a father, both of us, we sit and think about what a normal guy, because neither one of us have had military training at all. What would a normal civilian like myself, just, for instance, if I was in a grocery store shopping and I had my family with me, it's holiday time right now, place is busy, it's packed, crowd's bustling, you're standing there just not focusing on anything, and all of a sudden you hear shots fired and people running in an environment like that. What's the next step?
What are we supposed to do as parents to protect our child, protect ourselves?
Well, excellent. All right, let me tell you this. Remember, this is about the initial thought of taking that responsibility. I applaud both of you as fathers, and it's sad to me that oftentimes I'll have an audience with mothers, and especially if it was just, kind of ad hoc. It wasn't a scheduled meeting where people were coming for a purpose. And a lot of the mothers have no clue of what they would do to defend themselves. And the problem I have with that is it's only in our human society, and maybe more so America. I'm not going to go down that road. I don't know for sure, but where, I don't know, people seem to think sometimes that either it's not going to happen or someone else is going to take care of them. In the jungle, the most vicious animal is more often than not the female. And she is the one that's taking care of the kids. And that's why they had that bred into them. Yet, in our country, unfortunately, not the case sometimes. So, having said that, let me just also add this. We have talked in the past about a lot of things, you two. And everything I do has a lot of consistency. There are a lot of elements or principles that are the same. And the reason they are is because they're effective. And I have designed classes for the airline industry to every form of incident like this for law enforcement. I've rarely been asked to do anything for civilians, but I've always had the desire to. There's just not a venue for that, so to speak. And the first thing you want to think about as far as those principles go is remember it's not always just a technique, a tactic, or even a tool that's important. It's the mind. And what I want to do with that is I want to explain that quickly is in the mind, in the lack of thought, there's panic and confusion. And what I mean by that is if you buy a computer tomorrow and it's Christmas time, you're going to buy a computer for your kids, or I don't care if it's a laptop, desktop, iPad, doesn't matter. When you buy that computer and turn it on, it doesn't do anything. You have to program it. You have to put in the applications you want to use, and then the computer begins to learn. But without that, the computer turns on and it's stagnant. It sits there. It has a blank stare, a blank mind. You see, if you apply that to the human brain and there's no thought, you're going to get panic, you're going to get confusion. Or even if there is some training where there's a plan, if you don't have time to prepare for the incident, often you will get that override. And then once again, you have nothing happening. You follow it? You know what I'm saying there? Does that make sense, you two?
Yeah. And I want to touch on what you said earlier. We both mentioned that we were fathers, but more often than not, like Randy said, going to a grocery store or something like that, it's usually the wife that goes out and gets the groceries. It is in my family anyway. It's usually my wife and my daughter. And, now since the incident at Sandy Hook Elementary School, it really, plus, we've had incidences like this before, but not with so many children. And it gets me thinking, I want to convey something to my wife. I want her to learn something from this interview.
Excellent. Well, here's the summation of that brief topic I just introduced you. And the bottom line is this. All I'm saying is if you introduce some kind of plan, something that has a reasonable process that you can apply to a situation, something that's fundamental so you can apply it across the board, then instead of panic or confusion, you have something in your mind that you can draw up, just like bringing up a file on your computer. And you can say, okay, here's what we have to do. Because now what you're doing is you're occupying the mind with something constructive, something that's going to help you get through it instead of allowing fear to override your mind. We beat fear by having some kind of plan of attack, some kind of data, some kind of training and or positive experience. And let me emphasize that, positive experience. But we'll touch base more on that. So let me just say the first thing that you have to do, and here's where women actually have an advantage, not to be sexist, and I apologize if that's the way I'm sounding, but they'll have that term, woman's intuition. Well, it's very important. I don't know if women have a greater intuitive gene. I do know this, though, that it's fostered in women as they grow up, in young girls. We hear of it all the time. That's why there is a saying, woman's intuition. Men have it, too. Fortunately, it's not macho, and it's not nurtured as kids. And, when I was making a living training, it was one of the main things, I'm not going to say necessarily the hardest, but one of the main things I had to reintroduce to men is that, hey, in short, when the hair stands up on the back of your neck, you better friggin' stop and pay attention, because that's called intuition. And that's really starting to cross into some of the Asian concepts that were drilled into me as a young man, where you start feeling outside of your body. You start in something. See, as humans, we don't do that much because we don't technically live in a jungle. I beg to differ, but the reality is, if you take any animal who knows he's going to get eaten by another animal, I guarantee you guys, his intuitive ability is as strong as our ability of taste or sight. Right. You with me on that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what? Ironically, we do see that in society, but guess who relies on intuitive skill more than anybody? The criminal, the street thug, because he doesn't have any other training generally. He has lived on his intuition on how to pick prey and what will work more than anyone. So ironically, the bad guys have a leg up because they had to. It was necessity. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense. The bad guy knows what's about to happen. You know what I mean? They have the plan, and most people don't have a plan of reaction, and that's why we're calling you today.
They have a plan, but they also have more experience in sensing things and smelling things, just like a predator in the wild. Okay?
Well, hey, Chris, let me ask you, okay, in a public place, okay, whether it be a mall or a grocery store or just anywhere like that where there's going to be a higher traffic of humans, you know what I mean? How do you pick this scumbag out? I mean, what's the telltale signs of somebody? I mean, how do you? That's something you can train for, or is that just gut feeling, or are there actual things that a perpetrator will do to give himself away? Or
big question, great question. Remember, though, in reference to our topic, we're talking about two different things, but not necessarily. You could have a criminal that is looking for prey right now, because believe it or not, most criminals, I don't care if it's a pickpocket, a mugger, or something else, he doesn't just go out and take a target of opportunity. And don't get me wrong, that does happen, but it is generally not the norm. The criminal generally assesses and looks for targets. He is constantly measuring the society and the environment that he's in and looking for the easiest target to pick. He's looking for the best prey, the one that will give him the greatest chance of success. Now, on the other hand, we can take, and I'm not a psychologist, guys, so you got to forgive me if I don't use the right $3 word, but we can take a psychotic individual, like unfortunately these circumstances have generated. And I'm not going to go down the list, but this tremendously committed, actually even somewhat focused. You can see they're on an agenda. You can see they're looking for something. Sometimes, yes, more often than not, unfortunately, we have another telltale sign. And I hate to say this because every now and then you're going to see me in what seems to be military clothing. It might be bought from a great fashion place like H&M, but they might be fatigue pants. I might have a camouflage top on because I have a collection and it's comfortable cotton. But sometimes these people actually dress in such a manner. Now, I hate to do that because we know that's the wrong thing to stereotype someone. But really what I want to do is I want to suggest that you have to feel. And guys, what I'm saying is when you're out, people just have to look at people more. They don't. And you have to see with other than your eyes. You have to feel. I guarantee you that if we're in an area where these people are, if I could film it and someone walked into a public place, you would see a few people feeling creepy. And you would see others that are just totally oblivious anyway. And the guy will walk right past them. It could be Charles Manson walk right past them and they won't get the willies. So what I'm saying on that is the guy going to be wearing a red flag? It depends on how much you feel and observe. In this particular case, sure, everything was wrong. We've got a knucklehead in fatigues. I won't go on that because it's not the point. The first thing I want you to do to consider here is I need people to up until probably last week, I think now most people in America are starting to realize, and unfortunately we're going to get a backlash where we're going to have people reacting prematurely probably, but you know what? Not a big deal for me. I'd rather them do that. But here's the point. You have to acknowledge that this could actually happen, that it could actually happen to you, and then one more step. It is happening. As a law enforcement officer, I've seen a lot of cops, and it's the same thing. When their first major crime happens or their first felony, and they're actually there when the crime is occurring, it seems somewhat surreal. They still have to take a second to say to themselves, man, is this really happening? And the more experience you have in these things, the more you don't have that delay. Okay? We'll talk about that later, and it's part of a mental aspect that helps one prepare. But I have to have people realize, you have to acknowledge and realize this can happen to you, and it is happening to you. Does that make any sense, guys?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I had mentioned this to you, and I saw on the news that like 6 of the worst massacres in the United States have occurred since 2007. So absolutely, it's happening. It's happening everywhere, and it's almost like schools nowadays are somewhat preparing or have prepared for instances such as this that happened at Sandy Hook yesterday, and but it's really hard to stop a madman on a mission, if you know what I mean, if that makes any sense.
I do, and I'm digging you, and I understand where you guys want me to go on that. So let me take the next step. And the first thing is I need you to acknowledge that this could happen, and it might very well be happening. The next thing you have to do is you have to assess what is happening so you know what your course of action is going to be. If it's something that's specific, and remember now, guys, I don't want to just jump into a shooting.
Right.
It could be a guy driving a car through a building. It could be on purpose. It could be accident. Remember, I'm not going to talk to you about potential terrorist technique because I certainly don't want to give someone an idea.
Right.
What I want to do is take a case study on society, and believe me, I've seen cars go into buildings on purpose and by accident. I've seen things transpire from that point. I won't address those. So it's not always just a gunshot. And so what I'm saying is you've got to assess. But because of what you need right now, let's touch on that. Let's say most people today, when they hear a pop, God forbid, and I'm sad to say it, of course, because of these incidents, now they're going to say, Jesus, is this a nut with a gun? The first thing, guys, you've got to do is you've got to get down. You've got to get down. What does get down mean? What is it? Now, I know we have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to give you the answers, and I'm going to try and make it quick, and I'm going to try and put some order, some priority to these. Getting down, guys, is simple. It does two things. One, it makes you a smaller target. Very important. Two, it allows you perhaps to hide behind things that might be cover or concealment. Okay?
We're following you.
Okay, so get down. But the next thing you have to do is once you've gotten down is you've got to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What is going on? Now, one of the sad things I heard, and I don't want to get into what I've heard too much because that's wrong to speculate. But one of the things I heard about this horrible incident in Connecticut, and unfortunately I have to repeat the drama, but it was a woman or a person saying that they heard the shots, they had an idea what was going on. 3 people went out in the hall to assess the situation. Now listen, guys, first thing I said is get down. Next thing I want you to do in that process is to move to cover or concealment. Now, I can talk about the difference between cover and concealment, but right now, get down, get behind something. The difference, in short, is very simply cover is something that actually could stop the threat, meaning bullets, a bow and arrow, whatever. Concealment is just something where they can't see you. Sometimes you don't have the choice to be behind cover. Sometimes concealment is all you have. That's what you do. And there's a lot of little details you got to remember. You got to remember lighting. You got to remember how the lighting is for the bad guy, what their perspective is. And, you know, you always try and keep light in their eyes and all this other kind of tactical crap, but the reality is you might not have the choice. So move, get the cover and concealment. Now in the process of assessing, why are we assessing? What is there to assess? Well, you're assessing what is the threat, guys. You know, I have to know, is this threat moving or is it stationary? If we're in a school and the threat is it moving towards us or is it moving away from us? Do we have to extract from where we're at or can we hold? Can we shut the door, barricade it, turn the lights off? Is there a place where we can hide so that they don't know we're there? You know, and you have to measure these things. You have to measure them quickly. We could be in a mall. It's the same thing. Maybe in the store we're in, there's a place to hide. There's a place to go, and we don't have to run out in the hall where the bad guy is. I don't know. If we take the movie theater, well, that's entirely different. There's very limited places of cover. Maybe the priority there is to extract, find the exit, and go, which leads me to another point. I'm going to kind of jump around because there's no way any amount of time we have that I can categorically go down this. But you know what? I ask all my people, you have to know when you go places, just take a second, just glance and say, where is the exit?
Okay, let me stop you right there, Chris. All right, let's just say tonight, after we do the show, me and my family are going to go to a larger town and go to a restaurant. Now, this is a true statement, okay?
Sure.
We're going to go in this restaurant. We're going to sit down and eat. But in the back of my mind, you know, the events that's happened, that's going to be in the back of my mind, especially with all these people out during the holiday time. As the father, the husband, the dad, I'm going to go in the restaurant, and before we go get seated, I'm just going to be scanning around. What am I looking for? What do I look for?
Excellent. The one thing you want to do is you want to look for exits, all exits, even exits you can't see. You want to look at the exit signs. You want to know where the bathroom is and where the exits are. There always have to be a couple of exits to any building. Now, remember, just because it says in an exit doesn't mean these guys are following code. Maybe their door is locked. So even though you know it's an exit, can you breach that door if you had to? Can you kick that door open? Can you use a tool to break it open? Okay, that's a thought. The next thing is remember that I said you can't just take knowledge. Hey, you know what? You got to start playing a game with the kids. When I deal with a family and I'm there to protect them, I train the family. Because even though I'm good or a couple of my guys are good, we might go down, and I need the family to pick it up to stay alive. So we play games. We make games for the kids. How quickly can the kids remind the parents to put their seatbelt on and or lock their door? And as the kids are with me, as we're training the parents, the kids learn too, and they remind the parents. And so in this regard, I'd say you need to start making a game. How many exits can the kids identify? And here's another very important tip to remember. God forbid something happens. Maybe it's something deliberate, like a bad guy coming in or a nut, or it could just be a fire. Remember that. It could be toxic gas because an accident occurs. You know, there's certain criteria that apply now. Now you want to get low because most gas rises. Obviously, you guys know we could go down a million situations. But here's the point. If you don't know the exits, or you don't know where the exits are, or you're unsure of all the exits and something happens and you're in a commercial environment, guys, watch the employees. The employees know that establishment. They know where they're going to go. They know where the doors are probably open. They probably take their smoking breaks out those areas. Watch those employees and jump on their rear end as quickly as you can. And while I said that, how do you know where your family is? Here's a military technique. I don't know about all guys, but certainly the SEAL team. I can't stop and look for the family. The family needs to know the drill is mom is rear security. The kids got it between mom and me, and those kids have to grab each other's waistband. Hopefully they're wearing a belt so the belt or the pants don't rip off, but you grab that, and I want a hand on my belt. You know why? Because we're touching. And when you're touching, you don't have to talk. I can feel it. And I'll tell you what, if that hand is gone and I don't feel it, I stop right there. Because remember, ideally, you're thinking lights are on. Well, we never plan that way. We always plan worst case. Worst case is dark, and you can't see. So I need touch. I need everyone to feel, and you practice that. You know, you're like for the kids, like one of those books where all the elephants, the trunk touches the tail. And there's more to it than touch, than just them doing something efficiently. They feel it. You know, you guys interviewed Brandon Lee. One of my favorite things that her father said in one of his movies, feel. And we train everybody and everything we do to feel. Does that make any sense, guys?
Absolutely, because you could be outside. It could be at night. Lights could go out, like you said. Someone could shut the lights off. Someone could be using your techniques and shut the lights off.
And that's gonna take one less thing for you to have to think about out of your mindset.
Very, very good. Very good observation. That's very important. If I had more time, I would give you some serious gold starage for that one, because the mind is the key. And Robert, exactly right. So guys, that's play games, develop games for the kids, even develop those games for yourself if you have to. Always touch. You come up with a technique where you can grab on each other so you can make a train. You know where everyone is. You don't have to turn around to see it. And when there's more people, you have to be closer. If there's more people and it needs to be one gets on the piggyback or both get on the piggyback or you have to pick up and carry, whatever it is, but it's like an electrical circuit. If I'm not holding you, you got to be holding me and you got to be touching me so I know. And don't forget, watch the employees. They'll know the way out most of the time. It's very, very important. Does that make any sense, guys?
It makes absolute sense. Now, how do you know basically where to go? How do you assess where the threat is coming from?
Well, and that's very good. Now remember, having said that, you got to be careful. If I take, God forbid, God bless their hearts, these teachers, all of a sudden these teachers take on their role. They take on their role of responsibility for these young lives. But just like me, guys, I've had a lifetime of training with a firearm. But just because of that, I never treat anyone as someone I can take. I always treat it as I'm dealing with the best of the best. And therefore, I'm not going to stand in the open because I know I might be able to draw quicker or shoot straighter. I'm going to stay behind cover. I'm going to use a barricade. I'm going to use every trick and technique I know to preserve my energy and to provide the most successful result I can. And so having said that, what I mean by that is in your assessment, don't just run out. Think about what you're doing. Turn your phone to the mirror application. Stick your phone out low on the ground. Raise it up to see what's going on. Use a mirror if you can. Use a shiny piece of metal. Don't expose yourself to the unknown. You can't do that because now if I lose you, who's directing the kids? Sometimes you can use glass. A mall is a great example. Look across the hall to the other glass and see if you can see a reflection on what's happening down the hall. There's a lot of ways to accomplish something, but you first have to have the desire and the knowledge of what you're trying to accomplish. So one, we acknowledge, hey, this is happening. This is real. Two, we have to assess where it's coming from, or what is it that we're dealing with. Sometimes it's not a guy with a gun, a guy with a knife. A weapon's not important, but is it a chemical? Is it a fire? Is it a vehicle coming our way? You got to know, am I safe where I'm at, or do I have to get out of the way? So when you do assess, you have to assess carefully. Does that make any sense?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Let me ask you this, Chris. This is a good one. This is something that I think about all the time walking out to the vehicle, wherever we're leaving. If it's dark, we're leaving a restaurant or a store or something like that. You're halfway to your vehicle, which you couldn't find a good parking spot, so you're parked all the way down at the damn end. You get to walking, you get halfway there, and here comes somebody. They're stepping up to you and your family. Now, how do you address that situation? What are my actions there?
Okay. Here we're going to jump right to the assessment part. You've already acknowledged that something is going on. You don't know if it's specific to you right now, but you're going to be prepared. What you've already done, Randy, and what you've told me is something very important to us. We have a couple of lectures that we generally give, and one's on mental conditioning, one's on mental awareness. They're two different things. You're covering a little bit of both. I'll touch on those in a minute, but now's a good time. Mental conditioning is a way to prepare our mind. It's a way to gauge our mind. What are we thinking about? Are we oblivious to everything? Do we know what's going on? And sometimes it's just being aware. The next step is actually a specific awareness. There's something going on. So you've jumped to what we put, it's actually a color code, and you jump to orange. What orange is a specific awareness. Now it's not just looking around. Now you have a possible threat coming at you, okay?
Okay.
All right. Now, back to the assessment process, you've got one target. Generally, bad guys don't work alone, especially successful bad guys. So you have to note his direction and where he's moving, but you got to always look 180 degrees and see where his partners are. Are they bringing up a vehicle? And at that point, they're thinking, okay, rounding up the kids, and what direction are we going to move? Because if they're any good, they've anticipated your effort to escape them. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I got a question real quick. Going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, as far as assessing, you have your family and you have gotten to a relatively secure location, but you can still see what's going on. I mean, as far as alerting people, what would I do? What would be the best way to alert maybe the authorities or something like that, you know, of what's going on? I mean, how would I describe stuff to the authorities about, about the emergency that's happening?
All right, good point. I mean, quick and dirty though on Randy's thing, you can press a button on your car, which is the panic mode, which will set the alarm off. Mm-hmm. The kids can start screaming if you want, or you can stop dead in your tracks and say, hey, what are you doing? You could be wrong. The guy might have been going past you to somebody else, but what crime is there?
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you, you're a trained professional in this stuff. A guy's coming up to me. He's my size, and I'm a pretty good sized guy. I'm not no athlete by no means, but I'm a good sized guy. A guy's coming up to me, and he's similar size. What can I mean, do I just want to start screaming at the top? Do I want to be aggressive right off the bat, or do I just want to, what do I say to this guy?
Okay. Robert, stay on track. Bring me back to your point. I want to touch base a little more on what Randy's saying, and I want to get to it. Here, let me give you a quick example, guys, of what happens for me. Now, when I work for someone, there is a process of training that goes through our time together. Generally, the people I work for are very successful at what they do. Obviously, they don't do what I do. That's why they hire me. So their mind is very occupied. They're doing what I'm doing. Even my young lady in my life had to get used to what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. But I can tell you this, for example. Today, when I walk with the boss, or I'm walking with the young ladies, let's just say we're at the mall with the boss. I'll be at a business establishment, which happens to be a casino with a lot of people around. But when we're walking, I'm always acknowledging, and I have to be aware of 360 degrees and who's around us. During that awareness, I have to decide who could be possible threats, and then I have to prioritize the threats. Now, you're normal people. You don't do what I'm doing, but here's the point. You're walking with your family through the mall, and there's somebody behind you, and you got a bad feeling. or that person is walking too close to you, or their pace is other than normal or rapid, or if it's none of the above and they're just behind you. The first thing I do is I sense where that person is. Are they in a direct path with us? Are they walking faster? Are they walking slower? I'll turn and look at them, but I might look past them. I don't want to make eye contact. I don't want to indicate that I know. I might use a reflection on a window ahead of me to see what they're doing. And you know what I'll do if I have just the slightest inkling I don't like it? Even if they're being rude, which is often the case, I will pull the family together or I will stop. Now, my family knows. If I stop, they know where to stand. They get in a position where they're protected, or I'll guide them to a position where they're protected, and we stop dead. I might stop and pretend I'm looking at my phone. I might stop and pretend that I'm talking to my family, but they all know what I'm doing, and they know that there's something wrong, and they are start thinking about the contingency. Where do we go? What do we do? What is the threat? And generally this person will be uncomfortable, and they will walk past us and stay clear away from us because we just told them we are aware of our environment. Does that make any sense?
That makes absolute sense.
Now, even in the parking lot, you can do this. Gather everybody up. Is there an area that's safer? Do you get between cars? Make sure they're cars you know that you can see into. You know, you don't want to step where the bad guy wants you. So if it's a car with tinted glass, you don't want to be by that. If it's the, paneled van that we all know is the pedophile van, you don't get near that. Now I just pissed off everybody that has a panel van, but they shouldn't have it then, goddammit. That's the way I feel. Pardon my French. Anyway, the point is you
we all, hey, Chris, we all think that. We all think that, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to concur.
That's how I want you to begin to think. Here's the thing. There are no friggin' laws that say you got to let people stand behind you, walk behind you. But you know what? We can't tell them not to, but I can stop if I want to and be ready. And if that guy keeps coming at me, then, buddy, you're in for it. Now, I'm not going to – this is not the time to talk about technique to take somebody out, and that's another subject in another class. We'll save that for another day. Okay? But the bottom line is you can do something about it. Start thinking differently, and you will act differently. And that's what this is all about, you know. And now back to what Robert said. You know what, Robert? Give it to me again.
Well, I was mentioning, like you said, we've got down, we've moved to cover, we're out of immediate harm, but okay. I can still see what's going on. I need to contact the authorities somehow. I need to contact law enforcement or something. What do I need? Absolutely. What kind of information do I need to be conveying to the law enforcement agents who answer the phone, to 911 or whoever?
Absolutely. Okay, this is great. Now remember, my first thing, though, is I need you to be safe and the family safe. And if you can immediately extract the area to a safe area, do it. Do it. Schools, they have to start applying more principles. They have to have rendezvous points. They have to go through these things, and unfortunately now they all will. But I got to tell you guys, we've had these programs for 20 years that I've been trying to implement to people, and they just don't listen. They don't think it's ever going to happen. Well, we know differently now. Okay, so remember, I don't need you worried about communication first, because it's not going to do no good or do any good if you're standing up to communicate and you're in the line of fire, all right? So first thing first, we've covered that for as much as we can on this conversation. Now let's say you can get to 911. Now remember, Robert, your family, let's say there's two aspects I want you to appreciate here. One, are you alone or are you with family? Because if your family is of reasonable age, and if your kids are really young, then obviously you got to remember, put them in a backpack, go to the piggyback ride, hold them, whatever you got to do. But then maybe the missus is there. Here's become a SEAL team immediately. You're the OIC. You're the officer in charge. You're making the decisions. You dedicate someone to be the comm officer, the communication specialist. Mom dials 911. Now, honestly, if Mom isn't capable, but here's how, and I'm only saying it because she's nervous, panicking, or whatever. Hey, this is what I'm saying, guys. It all goes down to the mind. You will not survive if you can't put your mind in gear. How do you override fear? You commit your state of mind to something that is positive, something that can help you get out of this. At this time, if somebody's panicking, you say, hey, call 911. Tell them this. Tell them that. You've got to occupy their mind so that you can override fear. Now, I can go into that more, but I don't think we have the time, so take it as that, okay? Now, if you're alone, you bet, then it's you. Here's what you need to say. And you got to be aware of this. Obviously, you're going to talk to a 911 dispatcher. Remember now, she's probably got other people calling. Maybe, don't know. If that happens, they should have other dispatchers picking up. First thing they need to know, where you are. So clearly, you've got to be able to convey and concisely. I am at the most fundamental term for your location. You know, I am at the XX Mall. I am standing outside of whatever store. You don't have a lot of time. A lot of civilians don't understand. You know, if you're a frogman and you're communicating under fire, on the run, while you're performing skills. So you're going to use very few words, and they're going to be very well thought out words, very efficient. So you got to. That's the first thing they need to know. The next thing you need to tell them is, what is the threat? I have a guy, a girl, an unknown. They have a weapon. They are wearing what? You could go into specifics later if you have the ability to do so or the time. But where is the person? Are they moving? And is there more than one? And you may not know that. So you say, I see one person. He is out front of Macy's. He is moving, and of course most people aren't going to know the compass headings. He is moving towards another store. He is walking into Macy's. And from what door? Are we on the second level, the first level? So where is the critical thing? What is the next thing? And if you can tell them something about the weapon, is important, but it's not necessary. Today, if the cops are worth anything, they're going to come ready for a rifle or multiple weapons. So where and what? They need to know what. The next thing, you know, if you can, you want to identify yourself and what you're doing, especially if you're moving out of that mall. You want to make sure that 911 dispatcher knows that you're coming out a certain door, but that's not critical. The cops know how to handle these things now. They're probably going to treat you as an unknown or a threat. They're not going to shoot you as long as your hands are in the air, but you got to remember you may face that. How about that? Does it give you any idea?
Yeah. I mean, you're in the store. Let's go back to the grocery store scenario. You're in the store. You've done all this so far. You're in a tight group of maybe let's say 10 to 15 people, all hunkered together. You're wanting to get out of that store. What's some tactics that you can use to get out safely?
Well, you know, those are a couple elements to consider, and this one really goes into more of the specifics or sometimes, you know, in a situation like this, and it's horrible to have to say this, but you may even want to be identifying the threats. What is this guy shooting at, or is he shooting at everybody? Is he just shooting at kids? Is he just shooting at women? It gives you an ability to assess what threat level you're at. You might be able to move with a little greater degree of flexibility than someone else. The other thing on the same token, though, is if the crowd is moving to a door and he's shooting into the crowd, please don't move to that door. Don't move with the crowd. Move against it. I'm not saying that's a rule. I'm merely saying these are things you have to be aware of. So when you ask me, you're in the grocery store and something's happened, what do I do? Well, okay, let's think about a grocery store. Remember, the grocery store has mirrors down the aisles for shoplifting. Maybe you could use these to your advantage. The ideal thing is get out of that store. But maybe the guy just left the store. Maybe now he's shooting in the parking lot. So your assessment process could change each step you make. The bottom line is you've got to move to safety. And if that's out of the store, great. Maybe it's in the store you can hide. But on that note, If you get yourself trapped into a corner where there is no exit, and he happens to be coming that way, you just made matters worse. So there's never a given that I can tell you. I can only give you fundamental techniques to apply, and then you're going to have to apply them to the situation. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I want to touch on what you just said there. If the last resort, like you said, you did something, you made a mistake, and you're faced right now with either you have to defend yourself. I mean, what are some tactics? I mean, this assailant, I mean, what's the last resort? I mean, you're face to face with somebody, an armed attacker. I mean, there's no talking this guy down. I mean, you're with a group of people. I mean, how do you disarm someone? You know what I mean? Do you try? You have to.
Right.
You know what I mean? You have to.
All right. You guys are going to put me on the spot on this one, and I never turn away from you. I love you both. You guys are trying to do it, and an effort like this from you two guys who normally just talk to people about things, and you a show to give to the community. I applaud both of you, and God bless you. I appreciate that. But this is where I'm going to open myself up with all the knuckleheads out there. I'll tell you right now, guys, you put me in front of somebody and I'll fight. I don't know that everyone else is going to do that, but here's what I have to say about that. You can hide under a table and hope he doesn't come after you. Okay?
Yeah.
If that's your choice, so be it. I am not going to say that's wrong. What I will say is if you're someone else that says, you know what, if I'm going to lose my life today, I'm going to fight for it. Or if you're someone else that says, I'll be damned if I'm going to let this person take the life of my children or my wife. I'll readily give mine up, but I'm going to do it in a way that I have a fighting chance. In other words, sometimes I've heard people that are in the bodyguard business or the security business, and they say, well, I'm willing to take a bullet or a knife or something like that. Guys, I have to laugh. Look, you're no good if you're dead. I don't say that. I do everything I can short of dying, because if I'm dead, I'm no good to anyone. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want you to just put your friggin' head down and charge him like a bull unless you know for sure that that's going to occupy his time and the family's going to get out. If that's what you think you need to do, fine. But here's the thing. In order to address that topic with some degree of professionalism, let's take a look at a fighting situation. Distance and timing are very critical in a fighting situation. You have to know where the person is and as they're approaching you. You have to take advantage of the situation, of the environment. Is there a place that you can hide where you can close the distance? Because I'm obviously going to make this worst case scenario. What that means is you are unarmed. Are there weapons in your environment that you can utilize? Can you get a fire extinguisher? Can you get a knife? Can you break a piece of glass and use it as a shiv to talk criminal way? There's generally many weapons. And remember, sometimes a weapon is balance. We capture balance from someone mentally and physically. You could throw a can against the wall that is 90 degrees from your assailant so that he might look. Now, on the other hand, some of these guys are so wigged out, they have no mind that they won't respond to any kind of distraction. In that case, imagination is the only limitation on distraction. Hell, if I'm in a grocery store, you can pick up a freaking chicken, you can pick up something, and throw it perhaps. Anyway, but the point I want to do is you got to buy your time if you have that opportunity. And if you're just stuck and he's coming, then you've got to identify perhaps the weapon. Is he going to run out of bullets? Is he going to have a malfunction? Is he going to have a magazine change? Could he fall? Could he slip? Is he engaged in someone else? Does it give you a better opportunity to move on him? Okay? There's one good thing about an assailant having a gun. If you can close the distance on him, a gun is very directional. Let me give you I don't want to go too much in the fighting thing because I I think I might be irresponsible if someone gets it wrong, but let me tell you something we use. We have a concept that we apply that's called human orientation. With this, you learn the fundamentals of the human body based on the skeletal structure and some psychology when it's appropriate. What I mean about physiology is if you stand to someone's 45-degree angle and you start to talk to them, before they do anything, guys, they will orient to you. And what that means is the human being is not comfortable with the compass heading. They're not comfortable at the 45-degree angle. They're comfortable at the compass headings. So if you're approaching someone like this, I want you to endeavor to come at them from a 45-degree angle, preferably from the rear. But another thing you can do on that approach is you can throw something right at the head. Give them, you don't have a gun, but you invented a projectile that's got a duck. Now remember, a lot of people are going to, this is where you guys are putting me on the spot. People are going to say, oh my God, that is so much crap. Listen, all I'm saying is you asked me, if you're cornered, what can you do? And by God, I'm going to tell you guys, if I'm cornered, I'm going to fight. And so this is what you have if you have nothing else. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, you got to use whatever edge you have available.
That's right.
If you don't have an edge, you make one.
That's right. Thank you, guys, because that is the truth. And then, if I was obviously in front of you, I can show you how to take a gun away from anybody. There's advantages. Like I said, one, the gun is directional. Two, the gun is their source of strength. If you get most of these guys are cowards and bully types. Once their gun is taken or once you impede that gun, they don't know what to do. Also remember this. And this again, you're putting me on the spot. I'm going to get critiqued heavily for this, but I do this demonstration. If someone has a handgun, guys, I know people that have survived from 11 hits of a handgun. Now I know people that have died with a 22 round. Do you know what the difference is?
Where they got hit at.
The will to live. That is true, but the will to live. You understand that?
I understand. I didn't mean any disrespect by that, but No,
but you're right. You're right. You've got to commit that I am going to get to this guy. And if you put your hands over that muzzle, you may take a round or two in the hand, but I'm going to tell you something. When I do this demonstration, I'll have police officers put their gun in their holster, cock their gun, and I'm at approximately 20 feet away. And they know I'm coming. I'm not going to try and capture their mind or anything. I make it very clear. I'm going to come at you. How many rounds will you get off if you get anything off? And guys, I'm about 85% right now. No one has ever gotten 2 rounds off from 20 feet away. Let me say that again. With a handgun. They know I'm coming. They draw it from their holster. No one has ever gotten 2 rounds off on me. And I would say 75% of the time they don't even get the first round off. And when they do, chances are this gun is not on target.
Might not even be a gun. This guy might have one of those ninja swords or something like that.
Well,
I'm charging this guy.
Remember, guys, there was an incident 2 weeks ago or so, and it didn't make big headlines, where this knucklehead traveled from the East Coast to somewhere on the West Coast, killed his father in a college with a bow and arrow and a knife.
I haven't heard about that. I hadn't heard about that one.
Oh, yeah, look it up. Didn't make the news because it wasn't a gun. He killed his father with a bow and arrow. He shot him with an arrow. It wasn't enough. He stabbed him. He killed his wife, his stepmother before going there, and then the knucklehead killed himself by stabbing himself. Let me tell you, this guy was definitely out there.
Mm-hmm. To go back to what we were talking about, the whole main theme of everything, you got to plan ahead for things like this. And that means not just reading over something one time and thinking you got it. This is something that you have to keep in your mind at all times and do it over and over and over again.
Yeah, and you also have to condition your mind to react at a second's notice. Right?
Well, let's talk about that last thing for a second. First of all, in a response to what you just said, Robert, absolutely right. But how do you do it? Here's what I want you to do. Listen, if you're someone, and I heard this on an interview the other day, and a woman said, "Well, I'm not a soldier. When I go to the mall, I don't think like that. Okay, you got it. I'm not going to change her mind. There's nothing I can do about that. But when the incident happens, she's going to want to know what to do. There is one exception to that. If you are a mother or a father and you're listening to this show right now, all I've got to say is, you like it or not, you have the responsibility to have thought of some kind of plan of every possible contingency for your children, because your children look at you as being all-knowing and all-capable. So as a parent, the minute that child is born or conceived, because now you got to protect mom, you have to know and you have to think about these things. Back to you, Robert, how do you do it? Hey, listen, every now and then, I'm not going to try and turn you into me. We don't need a world of me's. God knows that. All I'm
You're
saying
an all right
is every
guy.
now and then, no. You get in my brain, believe me, it's worse than the worst LSD trip, believe me. Every now and then, you guys have to take a situation, no matter where you are as a family, and say, okay, what if something happens here? Immediately, the kids should be telling you, and that's your game, the kids should say, where are the exits? Where are the exits in the restaurant? Where are the exits in the mall? Where are the exits at the doctor's office? Anywhere else we go, it's a challenge. How many exits can the kids find? Do they watch the employees, where the employees come and go? We can learn a building that quick on where the access routes might or might not be. The point is, you're making it a game. You're not turning your kids into survivalists. We're not saying the world is going to end. By the way, all of this is a moot point, because you guys know the world's going to end in a couple days anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this is just 2 days. Yeah, just a week's worth of knowledge.
Wait a minute. This is the 25th hour radio show. I'm not one of those other radio shows where we talk about the UFOs and everything.
Oh, we do it sometimes.
Okay. Well, bring me on one of those. I'm not sure what I'm going to add to it, but I feel like Homer Simpson there when every time he turns around, somebody probed him. Anyway, you have to, and a lot of people call this the what if game. But what I want to do is, I don't want to make it so morbid for the kids, but you know as well as I do now, it's got to be there. And you got to say, okay, kids, we're in the grocery store. Boom. Something happens. What are we going to do? And sooner or later, you're going to be amazed. Children are the best students. They're going to want to grab hold of mom and dad, make communication, do it physically. Let's find the exit. And on the way there, we're going to act as a team. We're going to have somebody watching the rear as we're moved. Somebody's going to watch the front. We're going to grab a couple things that we can throw, or items that we see we can use as weapons, and we're going to get out of here. And we're going to try and figure out which is the way out. So how do you do this, and how do you plan? Right there. You just say, generally, we need to acknowledge that it's happening. We need to assess the threat. Can we move? Do we stay? Do we barricade ourselves in, or do we go out? And then there's a multitude of details that I could add to that, and then you get out. If, like you said, Robert, you have no choice and you have to fight, then there are ways to do that. Obviously, it's very difficult for me to explain those to you over the phone, but I can tell you, there's another drill I do, guys, where I let a guy get behind me and he puts a gun to my head. Now, I do this with a paintball gun, and for all the people listening that think I'm a total crackpot, let me just say that I'm not a total crackpot, because I have to prove what I'm saying to you. And believe me, I've done these things for real. No one's ever had a gun to my head for real, because they've never been that good. But I'll put somebody in that situation, and guess what else I do? I cock the gun. They have a gun cocked and at my head, and they are behind me. You got it?
I got you.
The rule of the game is simple. When you feel me move, shoot me. Guess what my percentage on winning that one is?
I'm going to go ahead and just say 100%.
100%. I'll prove it to you any day of the week, and it's on film. So why am I saying that? Am I saying that because I'm trying to promote Chris Caracci? Guys, I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm only going to use a letter. F, no. That is not what I'm saying. I could care less. I've been there, done that. I know what I'm going to do. I'm not selling a product. I'm talking to my two friends, Robert and Randy, that want to protect their family. The reason I'm telling you that is I'm telling you guys the will to survive, and I'm saying it loud. Everybody just had to turn down the radio. The will to survive almost always overrides the skill to survive. If you want to know, I'll show you. But what I need you to know right now is, by God, if you want to live, there's a fighting chance. All you got to do is do it. And if I can defeat a guy who knows I'm going to do it, I've given him every advantage in the book, and I can still do it, then when I want to trick him in the real situation, and I want to cough, I want to bend over, I want to have a stomach ache, I want to be scared, I want to pee my pants, I want to distract him, believe me, I'm going to win it 200% of the time, if that makes any sense. Hey, let me ask you one thing. You guys mentioned something. I want to touch on it. I can't remember if it was Robert or Randy, but you brought up something. I spend more time on the mind than anything else, but it's very difficult to present those kind of subjects to people because very few people think they have any ability to control their mind because there isn't enough knowledge out there, and that's wrong. Believe it or not, you can control a lot of things. Again, it takes the desire. Will. The will is so important to me, and so important for me to convey that to you and your listeners. But out of the two main concepts and lectures that we build a foundation on, being mental conditioning and mental awareness, mental conditioning, it's a subject that helps you gauge the mind. It's kind of a preconditioning, and what I mean by that, and why it's kind of crazy to understand this, is after 9/11, the United States went to a method of this figuratively in the Homeland Security, where they developed this color code. Well, this color code concept was developed a long time ago by the United States Marine Corps. They try to keep things very simple. And they try to make it very easy for everyone to learn. I'm not always a big fan of the color code, but if it helps people get the point, then I have to go with it. So let me just take a second and explain to you a little bit about that. I'll do it quickly. In mental conditioning, there are 4 colors: white, orange, and red. In white, it's generally appreciated as kind of an oblivious to anything. A lot of people liken the color or the condition of white to sleeping. Yet, without them being zombies, we still see people walking down the street in white. You know, mind is occupied on something else, a fight they had with their boyfriend or girlfriend, or their job, or whatever. And you get from point A to point B, and it's like, geez, I didn't even know it happened. That's white, okay? Yellow is what we call an unspecific alert. Yellow, a good way to appreciate yellow might be if you're an associate of mine. I hate to say student because we're all still learning. Yellow, I like my people to appreciate yellow when you drive. You see, in the Navy, we're responsible for a lot of dignitary protection. We do a lot of driving training, and I have since, taken that on to the nth degree as a police officer and undercover. I've crashed a lot of cars, stopped a lot of people long before it was commonplace. And so I apply a lot of our knowledge to driving. And the reason I do that is it allows people to integrate it in their life. At any rate, when you're driving, you should be aware of the cars coming, going, who's turning, what car is coming to the intersection. Is he going to stop? Is he going to try to blow the light? So that's yellow. It's an unspecific alert. A lot going on, but you're aware, okay? Mm-hmm. Now we go to orange. Orange is now the car coming at you is weaving back and forth. It's not staying in the lane. Any minute now, that car may jump over the divider. Or you go to the convenience store late at night, which you're not supposed to do, and you see a car outside, and there's a guy in the driver's seat, the engine's running. And where's the clerk? What's the clerk doing? The clerk's hands are up. Okay, there's something wrong here, right?
Yeah, you don't go in.
Or, there you go, orange, okay, a specific alert. Or let's go to the mall now. And this guy is approaching you from behind or from the front. His hands are in his pocket. That's always something you know. Is he hiding something? You always want to see someone's hands. It gives you a good indication of what they're capable of. And, for me in my job, I don't wear a badge anymore. So in my security world, I have to look at everybody. I gauge their eyes, I gauge their mind without them indicating who I am now, because I don't want to attract attention either. I'm looking for that person that has some kind of intent. They seem to be committed to doing something. They seem to be in some kind of racetrack headed towards me, perhaps, or my principal, then the first thing I look for, guys, is their hands. Do I see their hands, or are their hands hidden? Do they have a coat over their hands? Do they have a coat, period? Because then what you look for is you look for a bulge where a weapon might be. Are their pants hanging properly around their ankle? Are they covered? I look for a watch band. I look for, are they holding a cell phone? That indicates a dominant hand. When I know the dominant hand, then I look on that side to see if there's a weapon there. Then I start acting accordingly. I move myself in a position to block them between me and the principal. At any rate, I'm getting off on a tangent, but that's giving you a specific alert. That's orange. Now we get to red. Guys, red is we hear pops. We hear someone scream. We see a car jumping the divider. Bottom line is, it's on. 2 words now. Red is fight or flight. You follow me?
I'm following you.
99% of the time, I want you guys to get the flock out of Dodge. I don't want you hanging there and generating an altercation. I just want you out until we get to the last resort where you have no choice. There's very little I can do without taking all kinds of fire and telling you how to fight on the phone. I'd rather do it in person where I can prove my point rather than subject me open to all the knuckleheads that want to stand in anonymity and critique. But fight or flight, and that's the only reason I don't like the color code, because red is a color that denotes emotion. And I don't want to apply emotion to what we're talking about, because emotion blocks thought. Anger is emotion. Fear is an emotion. It impedes thought. And I need you to override thought. We override fear. We override fear by having a plan, by having something to think about. And then you must commit your mind to what to think about. So let me quickly just summarize this, bring it to a conclusion. The color code allows you to go from 50 to 60 and not 0 to 60. In other words, when you're at least in yellow or orange, you're closer to being prepared for what may transpire than if you're totally oblivious. You turn a corner, next thing you know, a guy's got a gun to your head. And by the way, I teach my people how to walk, too. You walk around corners so that you give yourself some room. Make a game of it again. Is there a server coming around the corner with a tray filled with hot coffee? Are you going around the corner where you have room to maneuver? And we drive the same way. And I know I'm just jumping through it, but it's only because I don't have time and I'm trying to pick main points for you. So mental conditioning is about preconditioning, which means it's getting your mind prepared for something that could happen so that you're not going from surprise to have to handling it. But if you walk yourself into it where you're kind of in yellow or orange, you kind of already are ready for it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it's like you condition your mind. If you take these techniques at what you're talking about and you condition your mind, you really don't have to think about it as much. It becomes basically instinct. Basically what you're saying.
Well, you're right. I don't use instinct because instinct suggests that we're doing it without thought. But I don't mean to pick on you. You just hit a pet peeve of mine, and I won't dwell on it now.
Well,
but you're right.
But you're not.
You're controlling your environment, Robert. I want everyone to know that it is. Listen, let me put it to you this way. You're right, Robert. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you hit on something that I really want to bring out before I forget, okay?
Okay, I got you.
All right. If I take the majority of society, and not criminals, because then they're going to hit me with an odd question here. If I take the majority of society, when you interact with a police officer, and I'm using a police officer because everyone sees a police officer as a person that's handling your safety. If you interact with a police officer, the majority of the time you interact with a police officer, what are the circumstances? The circumstances are, and you can't see me right now, but I'm holding a clipboard and I'm writing on the clipboard. What I'm suggesting is, if the majority of the time society interacts with a law enforcement officer, he is taking a report. Now, if you buy even half of that, what am I saying? What I'm saying is that the police officer is taking a report about what already transpired.
I got you.
You see,
We're on the same page now.
The mere fact that he's writing is suggesting that whatever happened already happened. Now, I'm not trying to pick on law enforcement because I know a lot of good cops that if they could be there for you, they will. And, you know, in my entire 10 years of law enforcement, I caught a lot of stuff while it was going on, but I certainly missed a lot of stuff. I wish I was Spider-Man or Superman so I'd know what was going on everywhere, because I promise you I would be there. But it's not always the case. And so if a police officer, the majority of the time, is taking a report, whose responsibility is it to protect you and your environment? And when I say environment, I mean your loved ones and maybe a citizen. But whose responsibility is it? It's going to be up to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is where, guys, you don't see me again, but I'm cuffing that oblivious knucklehead that doesn't think it's going to happen to him.
I mean, do you have any, like, final words just for everybody out there who's listening to just to summarize this whole conversation and to give them a little heads up, you know, just one more time is what they need to be doing to prepare for things like this?
Guys, it's my pleasure. And, I jump to only a few people. I jump to the boss and my young lady when the phone rings. And when you guys call, I always make an effort to hear if you need something. I just want to say thank you and applaud you for being bold enough to take on this subject in the effort of helping the community and your fans that may listen. I hope I've done you justice.
You absolutely.
For what I have to say, well, thank you guys. I don't know. But for what I have to say, I only say this. If I've done anything in my life that's been of value, this has been my fabric. And I know that knowing this and being given whatever I've been given to be able to be alive today, I know that what my responsibility is now is to be able to give back in any way I can. And if there's someone out there that wants to survive or wants to live through something like this, you can't shut me up. I'll never stop. It is what I do, and it's what I think of every day. But I'm not going to be able to be there for all of you and all of your listeners as much as I wish I could. And every day I get older, so maybe I'm not quite as quick. But the bottom line is this. Please appreciate that whatever your political position is, it's not important to me. Just know this. You could take every gun and every weapon and everything you can imagine that could harm someone else off our planet, and we will still have sick people that will endeavor to harm others. And we can never stop that. And you're a fool if you think that you'll never face that, because then you will never be prepared to. And all I'm saying is, I'm not saying go out and buy a gun. I'm not saying carry a knife. I'm not saying carry a club. I'm not saying do anything, but I am saying this. If you are a mother or a father, you have to think about what you will do and what you can do to protect your family in any kind of event like this that could happen. And it might not be a bad guy. It could be a fire in a hotel. It could be the car going off the road into the river. There are ways to handle all these things, but the rule number one is to think about it and have a plan and know that it can happen to you.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.